All right, welcome to the Erie Music History Podcast. I'm Chip Schell, your host, and my guest today is calling in from Australia. So it is 7 a.m. my time, about 9 p.m., 9:30 p.m. his time. He has 2 Emmy Awards for work that he did in the 1980s on the TV show Santa Barbara. He has scored over 1,500 hours of original music for broadcast TV series, films, and documentaries. And in the mid-1970s, he moved to L.A., and became a top session guitarist, working with artists such as Barry Manilow, Minnie Riperton, Teena Marie, and the group that drew him away from Erie when he was just 19, the Lettermen. So welcome to the podcast, Art Phillips.
Well, thank you very much. Very honored to be here. Fantastic. 9 p.m., I'm having my glass of vino.
All right. That's not a small glass either. That's good. That's the way to do it. Art, your resume and experience is extensive. I didn't even mention your production company, 101 Music, that you still run today. We'll get to that. We'll get to a lot of other stuff. First, I should say thank you to your cousin and my musical buddy, Angelo Phillips, for connecting us. He's a great guy, great musician, big supporter of this podcast, and I'm actually going to see him play tonight.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So before you started traveling the world, playing for famous musicians, running your own company, let's tell the story of your days back here in Erie. You grew up on Cold Spring Drive, which is a short little street above 26th Street near World of Music. Your dad was a guitarist. Obviously, I mean, tell us about your dad and how that impacted you.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was definitely it. I mean, my dad, just a great man, of course, an amazing musician, had such a feel for the guitar. He was really known for his rhythm playing more than anything. He was just solid as a rock, and it was like a percussion instrument. He was just an amazing guy. And when I grew up, I mean, the day I was born, from the day I was born, and probably even before that, I had music vibrating all around me, of course, because my dad would practice guitar in the kitchen, every night. And he had a group called the Strolling Venetians, and they worked around Erie at all the Italian restaurants, strolling from table to table. And his partner was either a mandolin player or an accordion player or another guitar player. And throughout my childhood, I saw, him working with 5 or 6 different people as his co-partner, because it changed periodically. So as a young child, I had music in the background all the time,
Yeah.
And I would be in my bedroom, sleeping, and they would still be practicing because I would go to bed early, as I do nowadays at my age. But and I grew up with Italian, music, of course, and the old standards. That's really what it was, and because of my dad's passion for music, and he didn't do it full time for a living. He worked for the Erie School District, actually, in the maintenance department. But he played, I think, about 4 nights a week, as I recall, as a kid.
Yeah, and, I found lots of ads for. I mean, when I looked for your name, I found your dad's name a lot playing.
Did you?
Playing at places like the Cesar Batista Club, the Blue Max in the airport. That was a restaurant there. Pernice's Italian restaurant. I mean, places that are not around and haven't been for a long time. And
the Stagecoach Inn. And he used to play.
Right.
He used to play at the Erie Manicure Club. And a matter of fact, in my office and studio, I have all these photos on the wall of my dad from all those ads that you would have seen with him and his partner John Narducci and Renzo Armanini, the mandolin player, playing at all these different places. Just amazing. And luckily for me, I think I picked up the guitar probably when I was 5 or 6 years old, I think, but I didn't really start playing, until I was probably 7 or 8. That's still pretty young.
Yeah.
But I do remember, we practiced every night together, and, it was a slow learning curve, and my dad taught me. And then, my dad was well aware of the fact that he could only teach me what he could teach me, and that I should go to, other proper teachers. And I started with a great player in Erie named Sam Rizzo, and that was my first guitar teacher. So I used to go to Markham School of Music on 11th or whatever street it was, and and Parade, between Parade and State, if I remember correctly.
Yep, right, yeah.
You know, upstairs, downstairs, and we'd go downstairs in the morning, and Sam Rizzo would teach me, and yeah, just he was an amazing reader, so that really helped me in the early stages. Then my dad made sure that I had various people in my early life to teach me besides Sam Rizzo. I started learning with a great player named, I believe his name was Dick Honard. And
Okay.
Dick taught me a lot of really, really cool jazz voicings and stuff. And so between the three of them, and I had other teachers, I can't remember who they all were, it was just a really good upbringing. And funnily enough, I was probably 9, 10 years old, and I could taste what I really wanted to do,
Yeah.
and that's because of my dad and his father, Antonio Di Filippo, because our name is actually not Phillips, it's supposed to be Di Filippo. But when my grandpa, my dad's father, immigrated to Ellis Island, or at the States, it was 1901. He was only 7 years old, and they changed his name to Phillips. So my dad was born a Phillips. Sadly enough, this is sad to me because I think the Italian name is so important. But that's what happened. That's what happened. But my grandfather, Antonio Di Filippo, his name was Phillips, was a great mandolin player. And my mom's side of the family, who are from Lorain, Ohio, actually all four of my grandparents are all from the same little town in Italy, Montenero Valcocchiara in Molise.
Wow.
Vicino Abruzzo, about 15 miles from the bottom of Abruzzo, a place called Castel di Sangro. And if you cross the border and you drive up the little road up in the mountain, and it looks, if you're up in a helicopter or an airplane, you can see a little town, which is the Spoon, and a little road going in and out, the same road. So it's called the Spoon of the Mountain, Montenero Valcocchiara. Yeah.
Have you been there?
So well, about 6 or 7 times in the last 10 years.
Very cool.
Yeah. It's just great. But so really came from strong a musical background without actually realizing it, And
what did your grandfather play? Did he play guitar too?
Mandolin, and
mandolin.
And my mom's father played guitar and also was a singer. So, and all of the brothers and sisters in that side of the family also were players. They played music. So I grew up with this, and it was funny because my dad, loved his record collection, and he had a lot of records of a gentleman named who was my hero actually, and this was my, I'll get chills when I say this, a guy named Tony Mottola from New York. Yeah. And
I know this story. I want to hear this story. This is great. Yeah. Like, how did you even get on his rate? First of all, you're 9 years old.
It's crazy.
And you you're not in one of those families where it's like, you need to play guitar. Like, you liked playing guitar. So it wasn't like, sit down and practice your piano. And I mean, am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, no, that's right. There was something, I don't know, but there was a real passion about it. But that's because I heard my dad playing every night of the week in the kitchen, and there's just amazing acoustics that happens in the kitchen, but the whole house was always filled with guitar, and my dad's guitar in particular had a great sound, and I actually have that guitar now.
Oh, wow.
And I still play it. It's a 1942 Gibson L12. Anyway, but yeah, so when I was 9, and I should correct myself, maybe I wasn't 9, but I was probably 10. There was a record that my dad had of Tony Mottola. It was an album called Roman Guitar. I think it was a Roman Guitar 1. And there was a song on it that Tony was playing, a beautiful arrangement of a song called Anima e Cuore, which means heart and soul in Italian. Yeah.
Okay.
And I just loved his style. Mottola's style to me was like, that was it. And I think that's really one of my earlier influences. And I'll tell you later on in this podcast that I've gone back right to my roots. And a couple times a year, I do a solo guitar performance of all my own arrangements, but in that style, in a solo, chordal melodic style that Mottola was doing.
I watched some of those videos that you did.
Oh, did you?
For
Yeah.
the Christmas special.
Okay. Yeah.
And people, we should say Tony Mottola, he was the guitarist for Perry Como. He played for Johnny Carson. I mean, this guy, he was legit. He was, everywhere. But at age 9, what year are we talking for you? I mean,
well, I was born in 55, so we're talking 1964.
Yeah, I mean, so were you listening to the Beatles and other things at that time too?
Oh yeah,
this was your influence because of the music in the household, the Italian sounding sound.
I guess so. There was something about that sound that really got to me, and of course, I was listening to the Rolling Stones, the Beatles, and all that stuff, but not the same way that I was listening to that. It was a different thing for me,
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know how I guess I was 10 and a half. I actually wrote a letter to Tony Mottola. I wrote him a letter, right? And I have copies of all these letters, actually.
How do you even find out where to write Tony Mottola? This is the interesting part I wanted to hear from you is,
I don't know.
Does a 10-year-old write to a guitarist? What were you saying in those letters?
Yeah, I mean, I've often looked at those letters thinking, boy, I had a lot of guts, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I was a very shy kid,
Okay.
I was very shy, and I still am, And actually, as a kid, like I'll be honest, I was so shy that I had a stuttering problem. So how in the world I was, about this is what I want. I could taste it, I could feel it, and I've developed this thing in my life from this experience, and I call it FDP. And I teach entrepreneurship at a business school just for the fun of it, because I talk about my business and success and how you do stuff. And FDP to me stands for focus, determination, and perseverance. And that's what must have done it for me. I don't know where I got it from, but I did. Anyway, so I wrote Tony, and I just said, look, the first letter I wrote was, I'm from Erie, Pennsylvania, and et cetera, et cetera. And my dad has your records, and I love the song Anima Accorda. And I was wondering, could you send me your arrangement of it? That's what I asked him for, right? Anyway.
Do your folks know that you're sending this letter?
Yeah.
Okay.
They did. Right. Yeah. I wrote it to the record company he was with at the time, Command Performances. It then changed to Project 3 Records a few years later. I know this because we wrote back and forth, and I must have 20 letters, and it's just amazing. Anyway, he wrote to me and said, look, I'm sure you're going to do fine in your career. Hello, I was 9, 10 years old. He didn't even know. And, I can't send it to you because it's in copyright. And, but the way that I used to do it, I used to slow down the 33 records to half speed, and, it would be down an octave. And he said, that's how I learned. That's what I recommend you doing. So I did. I pulled everything down to 16 and a third, whatever it is. And, you hear boom, 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 and you learn. That's how you learn it. And that's what I did for years. And we kept writing back and forth. And he was very lovely and kept writing back to me. And then I called him on the phone a couple of years later. I was 15 or 16, and we would talk.
Wow.
And I know, it's crazy. And
were you talking about always like music and the songs that he played and how do you play them?
Yeah.
And techniques.
I would just ask him stuff, and I would always tell him, this is what I want to do for a living. What can you, and I was 13 or 14, and I went to the local place where you buy, great records. And I can't remember the name of the place. It was on 8th Street, but I bought a reel-to-reel tape recorder,
Okay.
And I would practice and record, and I created an album. I wish I had a photo of it, and I sent it to him, and it was an album on a 1/4-inch tape, 7 inch, and I had artwork on it and everything, and I sent it to him, and he came back and critiqued it, and I was probably 14 or 15, just nuts. The whole thing is nuts, and Chip, I got to tell you, I finally met him in real life, and
I was going to ask.
It was the highlight of my life. And I was working with Barry Manilow, and I invited him to the concert, and he came with his wife, and it was just incredible. And I think he was really quite happy and proud to see that this kid,
Sure.
I did this and that. But I remember the day before the concert that he came to the concert in New York, he invited me to a recording session, and I went to this recording session, and I met all the guys that, were on all his albums, like Bob Haggard on bass, and Vinnie Bell on guitar, and him, and I sat there, sort of in the session, watched these guys play, and it was like, it was the weirdest thing for me. I couldn't even talk. I couldn't speak. I couldn't even communicate with this guy, Tony Mottola. He was like my hero. It was like,
Yeah.
And I'm like 20 something years old,
I was going to say, how old was he how much older was he than you?
Well, he and my dad were the same age. They were both
okay.
born. They were both born in 1918, and this would have been 19. I was with Manilow in 1982, 83, 84. So it was probably 83.
Okay.
So I would have been 20. Oh no, hang on. 50, yeah, I would have been about 26 years old, and I couldn't speak. I couldn't.
Well, so eventually, like I mentioned earlier, the Lettermen play a big part in you leaving Erie, but Mottola is involved in that story too. So it's 74. The Lettermen play in Erie, I think at Gannon, maybe. How do you go talk to their arranger? I mean, how did that even transpire?
Yeah, well, I was with my sister and her husband at the time. I don't know what year this was. I think I was in 9th grade.
Okay.
I think I was in 9th grade, possibly 10th, but I think I was probably 9th. And we went to this concert at Gannon College, and it was a Letterman, and I was just in awe. Well, because that's what I wanted to do. I knew this is what I wanted to do for a living.
Yeah.
And I asked my sister if we could stay after the concert just a little bit as all the people went, because I wanted to go talk to the guy who was the conductor, up on the stage. And she said, of course, I'm sure, And my sister has a big part of this, actually, I have to say, and she'll be listening to this at some point, but I honestly have to say she is such a major force in my career without actually really knowing it, for two reasons. We stayed that night, and she said, of course, go. And Vince Morton, who was the piano player, the keyboard player, after the concert came back up to pack up the music and all the stuff. And I walked up on stage, and I had a business card.
Wow.
I had a business card. Yeah, it said Art Phillips guitar. And I still have this card because it's a classic, And anyway, so I spoke to him, and I don't know how I did, because I was very shy and I stuttered, and, I actually developed this terrible stutter in first grade because the teacher at the Catholic school didn't recognize that I had a bit of a deficiency in terms of, and it just got worse and worse and worse. And I found ways of camouflaging it my whole early life. I'm totally fine now, but this is true. And anyway, I don't know how I had the guts to get up to him and talk, but I did. And we talked for about 2-3 minutes, and I passed him my card, and he gave me his. Big mistake.
Wait, how old are you again?
I'm in 9th grade.
Yeah, you're in 9th grade. You hand him your card. Okay, I love this. Yeah.
And I put his card in my wallet, and I said, "This is what I want to do." And and he said, "Oh, it's a great career. What you should do is learn as much as you can to go to college and all that stuff." Yeah. So anyway, that was that. And I go through 10th, 11th, 12th grade, and I'm working with people like Ron Seggi in town, in his band, and I'm his arranger and guitar player.
Yeah, I want to talk about that too. Yeah,
it was a great band with Durf Hopsinger on bass, and just Rick Cass on drums, and it was
they're part of that group that I told you about that I have as the house band each month.
Okay. Oh, right.
They're part of that group. Yeah.
Oh, well. Yeah. These memories are so solid. But anyway, it was a great upbringing, and I learned. I learned well from people like Ron. Who's a real pro, and all the other guys, and.
We'll go back for a second. So you're at this, you hand your card to this guy, and you're in 9th grade or whatever it is, but you now have been taking lessons from people for a while, but you start teaching at Osiki's for a little bit, don't you? Or?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, that's I forgot about that. I actually taught at Osiki's. I was quite young. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I wondered.
Yeah. And I taught I think it was on Parade Street. Yeah. And, how I got that gig was Mike D'Amico. He was a guitar player, and he worked there, and he was a great guitar player. And I sort of got to know each other. I was a kid, and he liked me, and a position came up, and he asked me if I wanted to teach, and I said yeah, and that. So after high school, I would drive over there and teach until 8 o'clock at night,
Wow. Did you play guitar in school, like in bands or anything, or jazz bands, or?
Oh, yeah, most certainly. At Academy High School, I was supposed to go to Strong Vincent, but they changed the boundaries a week before I was going to high school, and I ended up going to Academy, which I didn't want to go to, but I'm so glad I did because that experience was sensational. Bill Berger was the band instructor, and I was in his jazz band, and yeah, that was a great experience. So that really pulled me up a lot as well. Yeah.
You graduated 73, you said? Or?
I did, yeah.
There were some other musicians in that school at the time too, I think, that did well. Who were some of your buddies that you remember?
A lot, yeah. Oh, well, Mike Applebaum, he's in Italy now, and he's a brilliant, trumpet player. He left a bit early. I don't think he graduated with us. He ended up going to Rochester, New York, or something. But of course, there was a lot of musicians in that school, and I'm very good friends with a lot from Strong Vincent too, like Dan McNamara. Dan is a really
had Dan on the podcast. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, Dan did an album for me for my company, 101 Music, because I have a library production company. Yeah. And that album, he did 3, all percussion, and it's doing really, really well. So Dan's a great talent.
Yeah, he was a great guy. Yeah. Yeah. He was a fun interview too. Okay. So we haven't even got you being graduated yet, but I mean, we're getting close. And you've got this relationship with Mottola, the Letterman guy. You make this connection with him. You hand him your card, and then what transpires?
Okay, so 3 years later, I graduate high school, and I'm going to Berklee School of Music, but I never got there. Right? Okay. Because I'm at my sister's house one night with my girlfriend, and we're talking, and my sister says, so what are you going to do? I said, yeah, well, I'm going to go to Berklee, and she said, that's great. Why don't you try and get a job with like the Lettermen or something? She said this. She said,
why the Lettermen? Just because you guys had gone to that concert?
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah. And I said, and she said, don't you remember you met this guy? And I said, yeah. And I said, well, matter of fact, I actually have his card in my wallet, and there was nothing left of the card.
3 years later.
Anyway, she says, why don't you call him right then and there? Why don't you call him? And we just finished a pizza, playing cards or whatever we were doing. And I said, really? She said, of course, use my phone. There was no mobile phones then.
Yeah, right.
And literally, I picked up the phone, and Vince Morton answered the phone at his house in Los Angeles. And I said to him, and I lied. I said, actually, I don't know if you remember me. It was a few years ago. And he said, oh, I think I sort of do. And I said, yeah, Vince, look, I was just wondering, I just graduated high school, and I'm looking for a job. And I was wondering if I could have an audition with the Letterman. Hello, And I said, I'm going to be in Los Angeles next week. And I wasn't. I had no plans. I had no plans to be in Los Angeles. And he said to me, and my heart sank. He said, oh, I do remember you. Aren't you the guy that, I think you gave me a business card? And I said, yeah. He said, well, look, we just hired a guitar player, sadly enough, but keep in touch. And, one of those stories,
Sure. Right. Yeah.
Anyway, that was that. And I said, but I'm going to be in Los Angeles. And he said, well, look, when are you coming? And I said, in about a week, possibly 2.
And you were not.
And I was not. And he said, well, look, I'm in town until, because then I'm back on the road with the Letterman, and until was about 3 or 4 weeks away. And I said, okay, look, I'll let you know. Anyway, I booked a flight, and I called him again. And I said, I'm going to be in town. And he asked me where I was going to stay. And I said, at the Hollywood Inn in Hollywood. And he said, so when you get to town, call me and I'll come pick you up, and I'd love to hear you play.
Wow.
I called him, and he came and picked me up, and I was so lonely. I was there for 7 days. I didn't know what to do. I called people like Doc Severinsen when I was there, and all these people on the Tonight Show. I called recording studios trying to figure out how can I be a session guitarist in town. I did it all the wrong way. I had no idea. I was so young. Anyway, Vince picked me up, went and had this audition. It was a terrible audition, I thought, really. And I was really, really depressed after it. And I figured, oh, what am I going to do? I'm going to go back home. I guess I'm going to Berkeley. Not that there was anything wrong with that, but I really wanted to get it happening,
Right.
Anyway, 2 months later, Thanksgiving night, 2 months later, the phone rings, and this guy on the phone, his name was Art Silber. He was the road manager for the Lettermen. And he said, we're in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Vince told us about you. He's no longer the musical director, but we are in desperate need of a guitar player. We understand you live in Erie and we're in Pittsburgh, and we're wondering if you could come down on the weekend because Tony Butala, the owner of the Lettermen, one of the singers, would like to meet you and audition you because we understand Vince heard you and he's recommended you.
Wow.
And I said, who is this?
Yeah. It's Thanksgiving night. Yeah. I mean, someone's
I thought
calling
this was
you
a
and offering
joke.
you. Yeah.
Because I told people that I did this,
Yeah.
It was for real. And that weekend, 2 days later, because it was Thanksgiving on a Thursday night, on a Saturday morning, I drove down the worst snowstorm I ever remember in my life, drove all the way down to Pittsburgh, met the guys, had an audition. Vince wasn't there. He was no longer with the band. I got the gig. I drove back to Erie, actually on the Sunday night. And the plans were I'm hired and I start in January. I have to fly to LA in January. First tour is Japan, Hong Kong, Philippines for 2 months all up. Right. And then the first gig back in America is in Erie, Pennsylvania. At the Erie County Fieldhouse.
How about that? That's crazy.
It's insanity. Yeah.
I mean,
and
that's
and truly that is what happened. And that was my launching pad. Now, Tony Butala, I still don't know the true answer to this, but I do know that Vince Morton and Tony knew each other. And Vince had told me at one point, and Vince is still alive, so I should, re-ask him. I can't remember, but there was a recommendation that they knew each other and they heard about me from that. That's not how I got the gig. I think I got the gig from the audition. But these two ironic things that actually happened. My sister was so responsible for those two items. Yeah?
There you go. All right. Yeah, it all comes full circle. And so, people may be listening to this and thinking, okay, this guy, he's 19, 20 years old. He goes to Pittsburgh, he gets this gig and everything. But what live experience have you had so far? So you mentioned Ron Seggi, who's also been on the podcast before. You played with him. Charles McCormish, Accents on Sound. You played with them. I don't know what that was. Do you know what that was?
I can't remember, but I did a lot of work in Erie with bands like the Hayner Brothers and just various things. I had my own little jazz trio with Dave Kane on piano, and
so that's what it was, mostly jazz stuff, or like Ron.
With Ron, no, but it was sort of jazz stuff because that was happening. But and also, I used to play with my dad. So as a youngster, I skipped this part. Is that when my dad's partner got sick, I would have to go fill in at the Erie International Airport or the Erie Manilow Club, and I was underage, because the drinking laws. I don't know what 16 or 18 there. Or it's 21 there.
It's 21. Yeah, right. Yeah.
I was out there playing with my dad when his partner got sick at 15 years old.
Okay.
So I would have to strap on this guitar, and we had a white shirt and bow tie and a vest or whatever, and I had to stroll around table to table with my dad. It was so embarrassing. I remember it was watching all these romantic, beautiful people eating, and we'd playing the songs, but that was great experience. You see, that was great experience.
How did you become the musical arranger for Ron Seggi? Because you were 18 years old when you were doing that. How did
I don't know. He just sort of trusted me. I didn't know what I was doing, really.
Yeah, you guys were probably close in age, right? And there were a lot of people in the band. You were
Well, I did it, and I don't really know how qualified I was to be the arranger. It was an experimental process, I think.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. But it sort of worked. Yeah,
I think he's mentioned you and given you credit for that in articles I've read. It talks about musical director Art Phillips is back with Ron Seggi, and so All right. Well,
Well,
and
I thank Ron for that, because that was a real, you know, a guiding light in terms of what I ended up doing in my career. Yeah.
sure, sure. Were there
Yeah.
other musicians in town that you admired or you would want to see or you remember at that time, even either through Osikis or Markhams or something like that? Or were you so focused on what you were doing?
I was pretty focused on what I was doing. I mean, I wasn't really in the rock scene a whole lot,
No.
which is strange. I mean, there's a whole group of great Erie musicians that I only got to know later on, like Ron Guzik and Ed Pouton, who's now sadly
Yeah.
passed away.
Right.
Very, very, very sad.
Very sad.
I used to talk to Ed on Facebook a lot, and yeah. So I mean, it's really weird. Like Paula Holmes and people like that.
Sure.
I don't know. I sort of missed all that, and I don't know how and why. And I'm quite sad about that. Because that was like the real foundation of Erie, and I was sort of out on the outskirts doing this solo whatever it was.
Right, right. Well,
I don't actually know.
And we should point out, like you said, I mean, the drinking age was 21 years old. A lot of those folks were playing in bars already. You weren't, old enough to go. So, I mean, unless you saw them at like Wyco's or stuff like that, you didn't get a chance to see some of those other bands.
No, well, I didn't because I wasn't into dancing and I was, very shy. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. All those folks, Ronnie Guzik and Paula, they've all been on the podcast before, and I'm super lucky to have them do those interviews. So let's talk about then. So it's 75. You are, like you said, you get this gig with the Lettermen. It's January. You rehearse for a week. What happens?
Yeah, we go to LA and I go to LA and we rehearse for, a week. A place called Sound on Stage, I think is where we did it. And
Were you the youngest guy in the band?
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Really?
I was. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we flew to Japan and that's where we started our tour. And that was it. And, I really, that those next 2 years of my life, I think I was only with him for 2 years, and I decided I wanted to leave. It could have been 2.5 years. It was a hard decision to actually leave the band, but I knew I wanted to go to LA because I started to meet a lot of great musicians in LA, like Tommy Tedesco and people like Tom Rotella and Dennis Budimir, really great guitar players, and Bob Bain. And we became acquaintances, and they sort of liked me because I was young and up and coming, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I stayed with the Lettermen for about 2 years or 2.5 years, and then I decided, okay, well, that was a really great experience, but I want to go to LA and really woodshed it, really learn, write the trade, and that was tough. It was really tough.
I bet. I mean, being a session musician, you're one of thousands that are trying to make it. I mean, how do you even get in? Do you, like you said, just call studios? I mean, you made some connections. How does that work?
No, that concept didn't work like I thought it would. It worked when I was younger, when I went to LA for the first time. No, like that doesn't work that way at all. And really, I had, I wasn't really quite even ready for this. Really, it was a whole thing in itself. So, but I got, a bit fortunate. I mean, a lot of luck came into this for me. I was an okay player, but I wasn't a monster. I wasn't a monster player. That's how I feel. But there was something that I had, I think, that actually did work, and I think it was a sensitivity, I think is the word that I would use in terms of the way that I play and the way that I think and the way I feel about, right, sort of attacking the instrument or understanding what's going on. And I think that's what's got me through my career. I mean, I'm an okay player, for sure. But I think a lot of it has to do with my focus and passion and determination and time of doing it. The amount of time that I've done it now, it's all pretty natural to me. So, I'm okay with it,
Sure.
But where I really sort of ended up shining, I think more than anything, I think guitar is a big thing for me, and I still play and I'm still passionate about it and all that. But I think what really happened for me was I realized, in the late 70s, I got a little bit fortunate where I started writing songs, and I co-wrote songs with people like Minnie Riperton, who
Right.
her last hit was a co-write that I did
Yep.
with her and her husband. And that really started to launch my thinking a little bit differently, that I wanted to see more longevity in terms of what I was going to do. Not, I didn't want to be on the road forever. I didn't want to play guitar only for a living. I wanted to do other stuff like write music,
Yeah.
And that's really where things really started to open up for me. Again, a slight career change. And in LA, it's not easy to make a career change because you get stereotyped, and people who thought I was, with the guitarist that was looking for the session gigs, which I was okay. I was quite successful. I wasn't Larry Carlton, getting those gigs,
Is that a big leap? Do a lot of people say you can't become, a composer from being a lead guitarist? I mean, is that unusual?
Yeah, it sort of was. I was doing a lot of different things. I was a guitarist. I was doing arranging. I was doing some conducting. And then I started to score TV shows. It's like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
What am I doing? But I was doing all those things, and it's really interesting. I mean, I'll just take a quick leap ahead. In '88, I decided to leave LA and I moved to Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a couple of reasons I did that, which I'll go into later if you have time. But
yeah,
one of the things about Australia that really was great was that they allowed you to do all these different things in your career, to be diverse in your industry without anybody saying, well, hang on, that doesn't work. In LA, it's a different story. It was anyway at the time.
Interesting.
So, yeah.
And so you mentioned Barry Manilow and playing with him, and I think that kind of got you to Australia originally. Is that correct? That was your first...
No. The first time I came to Australia was with a very famous European singer, Egyptian Greek singer named Demis Roussos.
I'm glad you said it because I couldn't figure out how to say it. I saw it on your bio. So
Demis Roussos, he was very famous. He had, not in America. He wasn't big in America at all. But in all the Spanish-speaking countries and Australia and Europe, huge. I mean, like Julio Iglesias, he was, yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and I got the gig as musical director for Demis because Lenny Colton, who was a guitar player in LA, a session player that was working with Helen Reddy, ended up getting another gig, and he couldn't do Demis's gigs anymore, and he called me and said, "You conduct, don't you?" I said, "Sure." Anyway, so I got the gig.
Yeah.
So I got the gig, and this big limo came to pick me up one day and drove me to Beverly Hills, and I, rolled down the window, and this guy with a big caftan was standing on his huge property, and which was Demis Roussos in Beverly Hills, and we hit it off like that. Wow. Lovely guy, lovely singer. My mom and dad would have, loved his voice because he was like the crooner,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just an amazing singer. And I toured with him, and that was my first tour to Australia with him, and that was 1980.
How long did you stay with him?
Until just before Manilow. I was with Demis 80, 81. Yep. About 2 years. Okay. All right. Yeah. And about 2 years.
So you're dabbling in this composing and portion of your career. Am I saying the right word? Is it arranging or is it composing? I mean, they're different.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's different. I mean, I was doing a lot of arranging in LA as well. I was doing stuff, I have arranged, I co-wrote some songs on a show called The Love Boat, which of course you remember The Love Boat. Yeah?
Sure, right.
And I was doing some arranging there for Joe Harnell for the show because he was the composer. And actually, I was in the house band on camera on The Love Boat for about 32 episodes. So if you look at, the rule in Los Angeles with the AFM Local 47, which is the musicians union, is that anybody that is on camera performing has to be a real musician, and they have to pay you proper scale, right? So anyway, so in my early days in LA, I met this wonderful guy named Johnny Oliver, who was a contractor. We call these people contractors. And he would hire musicians for sessions, and he would also hire musicians to do something called sidelining. And on the Love Boat, they had a band all the time, of course, right? Well, I was in that band. I had an afro, and I had a red guitar, and I did 32 episodes over 2 years, probably, during 76, 77.
Okay. And I'm looking at you now. You don't have curly hair at all. I mean,
No.
Did you have a real afro or?
No, yeah, well, no, it was permed. I don't know. It was the in thing to do.
Oh, it wasn't a wig or anything that they put on you to look that way. It was.
No. That was my
You
hair.
and Dan McNamara both had afros back in the 70s. I've seen the pictures. Yeah.
It was something we did. Who knows why?
All right.
I think it was like the Mod Squad guys. Or
Absolutely. Yeah. You were Link. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
That's right.
So was that a regular gig? I mean, you did a bunch of those episodes.
I didn't like doing it. I mean, when Johnny would call me and say, "Art, are you free, on Thursday, Friday, because we need you?" I said, he said, "Mate, you got to do it." Well, of course he didn't say mate. I'm in Australia. He said, "Art, you got to do it. What else you doing?" I said, "Well, I'm waiting for a recording session." He said, "Well, this is just like a recording session. Come and do it." Anyway, I would do it. And right, the call would be for 5:00 a.m., and we'd get to, Fox Studios and Pico Boulevard in Los Angeles. And, we'd sit there, and sometimes I never even got to your scene. And you sit there all day, call back tomorrow. And, I can't come tomorrow. Well, yeah, you have to come back because you were in the other scene and we have to have the same guys in the band. Sorry. It's like, I didn't like it. I just didn't. And I don't know what it was. I used to get $110 or something for the day, whatever. I don't know what it was back then.
Right.
But we would have lunch outside at the table at the cafe at Fox Studios on Pico Boulevard. And sure enough, almost every day next to us was the table of Charlie's Angels, because their set was right next door.
Oh, well, so that's not bad.
So we sit there with the girls from Charlie's Angels, and we ended up talking to them. It was hilarious, really.
That was worth the day. Yeah,
but I just didn't really want to do it. And now I look back and I think, what was wrong with me? Why didn't I want to do it? That was a great thing. And here in Australia, they play old episodes of The Love Boat, and I often see. Oh my God, there I am. Yeah.
Now, during this time, you're not married or anything, right?
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
And so you're doing this, you're really living that life of when's my next gig, right? I mean, you don't know when it is unless you go on tour with someone.
Well, that's right. And we still live that way. You see, musicians are actually entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Really serious, interesting people, but we're actually entrepreneurs because we have a gig, but it's always short-lived. Everything always ends,
Right.
Whether you're playing with a band or you're on tour with a big actor, a small actor, or whether you are scoring a TV show or a film or whatever, it always ends. Everything ends. There's nothing that ever goes on, So I got used to that in my life, and it's actually great. It's scary, but it's actually great.
Yeah, keeps you on your toes, I bet.
Yeah. I'm never going to retire. I'm still looking for a gig, so to speak. Really.
Who were you on tour with the longest?
Probably Manilow, I guess. Probably
you went
Manilow.
on a few tours with him, or?
Well, I was his guitarist 80, 83, 84, early part of 85. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. And I've seen some videos of him during that time period. There's a big band on stage with him, right?
Yeah. And it was a great band. It was LA's top session players.
Really?
I happen to be in it, but I mean,
yeah.
So I'm not saying I was one of them, but yeah, a great band. And actually, Barry and I are still very good friends, and we talk occasionally. So he's just a lovely guy, and he's still going. It's amazing.
Yeah,
he's right. I don't know how old he is. He's a bit older than me, but he's still going. It's just incredible. He's an incredible guy.
And one thing I wanted to ask you, we're mentioning some of these folks that you played with, but I'm going to go all the way back to the Lettermen, because the Lettermen had been in the early 60s getting their, biggest notoriety, and then you joined them in the 70s. Were you a fan of them, or you were not?
No, no, not really.
I wondered about, like, as a session musician, because we're talking a little bit about that as a profession, you probably have to put aside, what you like to play and listen to and realize this is a job, so I mean, was it difficult sometimes? Because I know the Lettermen, in the early 60s, they were playing 200 gigs a year. I mean, they played a lot. And
They did.
when you were with them, they were still pretty popular, right?
Oh, yeah, huge, especially in the Midwest,
Okay.
Yeah. And we would, I mean, they worked a lot.
Yeah.
They worked, a whole lot. But I love their music because, see, that sort of music, which we sort of call mom and pop's music or MRR music or whatever you call it, there's a real, the songs are songs, the songs are
People
really,
connect.
they're just really well constructed, I mean, they're just songs,
Yeah.
great lyrics and, and great harmonic, elements to everything. And it sort of fit my psyche in terms of, my background, all the music I heard my dad playing, and I played with my dad. And, so it was in that era, not that my dad played that sort of music, like of the Letterman, but it still was all that. So it worked really well for me because it came from the heart,
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, when did your career change to, I don't want to go on the road anymore, I want to do more of this composing, arranging, and then eventually producing, right? I mean, creating your own company.
Yeah. Well, probably when I started to co-write the TV show Santa Barbara, because there were 6 writers on that, and I happened to be one of them. And I was very, very fortunate. A great friend of mine, Don Messenger, who was a music supervisor on a show called Guiding Light. What show was it? It was it Guiding Light or Days of Our Lives? Can't remember.
Soap opera.
Yeah. Actually, I think he did both. But I play guitar on a lot of his sessions on of the Days of Our Lives. Sorry, yeah, it was that show. So because I was playing, a session or two a week, for him as a guitarist, one day he said to me, "Aren't you a songwriter? Because you've done some stuff." I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Have you ever written for TV?" And I said, "Oh, a little bit. I did some stuff for the Love Boat, for Joe Arnell." And he said, "Because look, there's a possibility NBC have a new show coming up, and I'm not going to be able to handle it all, and I'm looking for a couple of people to help co-write. Would you be interested?" I said, "Of course." Sure enough, a few months later, it came up, and myself and Rick Rhodes, who's also now passed away, and Dom and a couple other guys, we all would co-write individually with Dominic, right? And we'd score the show. And I did that from as soon as I was doing that, just before I got the gig with Manilow. Is that right? Or was it just after Manilow? Oh, I can't remember. It was that period, 84, 85. And that really made me realize this is what I want to do. This is amazing because there's royalties but that's not why, because it's not about the money, but I mean, there is something about this too. But you see, it's just that the collaboratism of working with another creative element, a producer and a director, as a composer, is the most fulfilling thing in the world.
And so describe that to me. You're scoring a soap opera like Santa Barbara. Is it every episode you're creating the music that goes underneath, or it's not? Is it the intro song or?
Yeah, not the intro, because the song was written by somebody else. Actually, it's really funny, but the theme from Santa Barbara was actually written by Joe Harnell also, which is crazy. Yeah. Which had nothing to do with that connection, now that I think about it. But no, with Santa Barbara, we created a library of music, right? Which is what I'm doing now for my own company. But we created a library of music for the show. Out of 26 episodes, we might score 1 or 2 really important episodes to image. But everything else was was pre-recorded stuff that would suit what the script was going to be. So we'd know what the script would be about 2 weeks ahead of time. Excuse me.
You'd
and we
say,
co-write.
like, this is a good piece for this thing that's going on in the show, or
exactly. Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Dominic, who was a music supervisor, who was a co-writer as well, was the one responsible for putting the right music in the right scene.
Okay.
You know? That's how soap operas work, because the turnaround time is so quick. They can't hire a composer to score. There's no time.
Right. I forgot about that, because they're shooting them every day almost, right?
Yeah, that's right. So they create their own library. And now that's what I do now for a living, is I have a library of music, because there's a thing called, production music libraries in the world, and I have one of them.
Oh,
so
okay.
It sort of stems from that. But then I've scored a lot of TV shows, a couple of films, but mostly TV shows that have been, quite successful here, advertising stuff and things of that nature. But that collaboratism is something that I really love, working with a filmmaker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because, I mean, going on your website, you see all sorts of different, like you said, television, a lot of TV shows and everything. And I mean, it's quite a resume. And tell us about when you started your company now. Okay.
Well, when I came to Australia in '88, I started to get work as a composer in advertising. That's how I survived.
Why did you come to Australia?
Well, I came to Australia because my first wife was Australian.
Okay.
Not that that's the only reason that I came here. We had met way back in the Demis Roussos tour back in 80, got married, lived in LA. And when our first daughter was born in 84, it was a few years later that I realized I didn't know if I really wanted her to grow up in Los Angeles, because,
sure,
I'm not from LA myself. There's no family there, and not safe. And, I don't know,
Yeah.
So I kept coming back and forth to Australia, with Barry Manilow, with an artist named John Rowles and a few other people. And I just started to get these Australian connections in that early part of that transition for me, from 84 to 88 when I moved here. And I thought, this is really interesting. LA is changing. LA did change at this time. Well, because of MIDI, right? MIDI changed, technology changed the face of the session musician and all that stuff. Things were going a little bit odd. I came off the road from Manilow every month because, he only did a couple gigs a week. That was it. And we always had time off. And I come back to LA and I wouldn't get the work anymore because they called somebody else in the meantime. So I wasn't getting the sessions at Universal anymore. And, Art, okay, I'm sorry. I think you're on the E list now because, we weren't sure when you're back in town. This is what goes on. And so I don't know, something started to change for me. And I thought, wonder what's happening in Australia. And there was two other really good friends, really great musicians from LA that had the same idea. One guy was a friend of mine named Leon Gare, bass player. And he's just an amazing player. And Larry Mahobrak, who was a keyboard player, top session players in LA. And we all had the same idea because we all had this Australian inkling. And we all moved at the same time.
Oh, wow.
And also Louis Shelton, who is a guitar player that produced all the big buzz skag hits and all that, also came to Australia in the same weeks that we all did. The four of us. It was like, what are we doing? We're leaving LA. We're coming to Australia. and we all did. And we all never looked back. It's been amazing.
Wow.
And funny enough, Chip, for some reason, when I moved to Australia, I started to get more work from LA as a composer.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Go figure.
And that's when you started your company there?
No. I was doing a lot of work for music library companies like FirstCom, Bruton Chapel out of the UK, and Five Alarm Music, which is a music production company out of LA. And I was living here and delivering all the stuff I was doing electronically before we could do it that way.
Right.
And that started me to realize that there's this other avenue besides television to score to called library music. And you think of library music like elevator music, but it's not. It's a whole different thing. Anyway, so I did about a decade and a half of scoring for all those other major companies, which are all now owned by Universal. And I have about 65 albums out now with them under library production music. I survive on that because it gets used all the time. And, so it's a trail it's a long tail sort of trail of income, broadcast income.
Is it like royalties that you get each time it's used? Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. And about 10 years ago, I decided, well, I'm going to start my own library.
It's that recent. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Just 10 years ago. And I have 72 albums out. And I have representation across the globe, 85 countries, different sub-publisher in every region. Doing okay. I spend a lot of money on new productions because I make sure I release 6 to 8 albums a year.
Okay.
So
it's a quantity thing. You got to crank it out so that it's available.
Yeah, it's asset building, I suppose, and I could stop producing and just live on the royalties, but I don't really want to do that because I want to keep asset building,
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing. And just this year, all of my foreign libraries that represent me have always said, why don't you represent yourself in your own country? And I said, oh, I can't be bothered being like a local distributor. No, I'm just a manufacturer. So I signed my catalog to another big company. It was BMG that actually represented me here in the Australasian territories. And, I decided about 6 months ago, I planned ahead that, I'm going to move the catalog away. I'm going to rep it myself. I just started doing that last month. This is crazy times for me.
Yeah.
And the only way that I could do it, if I was going to do this, because I planned 6 months ago, is that I'd have to have other libraries that I represented as well, because I wouldn't be big enough for all the TV networks to want to come to 101 to look for music choices, because I only have 75 albums, and that's only about 1,200 tracks. And that's just not enough. So I put the word out, and I'm now representing 15 other catalogs from overseas, different, have a real variety of music, about 40,000 tracks.
Wow.
It's still small for a music distributor, but doing quite well after week 5. It's actually week 4.
Oh, wow. So it's new. Yeah.
Well, this little extension of 101,
right,
which is a new distributor, just brand new. And it's working well. It's starting to work well. It's a bit scary, but I like that. See, I like these risks.
Yeah. It seems like you are, you like the challenges. How old are you now, Art?
68.
68. So, you still got plenty of time to, do you play it all anymore? Go ahead.
Yeah. Once in a while. I just played the other day just for the fun of it, and, I do it to keep the chops up because, playing in the studio, which I do, almost every day I play on something that I'm doing, but that's not the same as playing live,
Right.
As it's just not,
Absolutely.
So, before I have a gig, and the last big gig that I had, I do once a year, I do this theater performance up the coast where they have Italian night, and they call me to do a feature for 45 minutes of Italian songs,
Yeah.
So it's all solo stuff. So I have to practice about a week before to get the calluses back up and the chops to make it fluent, because you can't, punch in and fix the problem that happened a couple bars ago.
When you were back touring, were you ever married?
Yeah. Okay. It was during the Manilow time. Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, okay. Because I wonder, that's got to be difficult, being gone for so long.
Yeah, but that tour was different because, it was totally first class. We flew on his private jet. And, Manilow would only sing twice a week, maybe 3 concerts a week, and we'd have the rest of the time off and in the town, or else he'd fly us back. And, so yeah, and he was amazing to work for. This guy, Manilow, I have to say, he's an amazing artist. He may not be the world's greatest singer, excuse me, Barry, for saying that, but he is. He's a fantastic singer.
He is, yeah.
But he's a performer.
Yeah.
This guy knows how to get the best out of the band, no matter what, after playing Mandy or, I Can't Smile Without You, 80 times, you think, but, honestly,
He
seriously,
connects. Yeah.
every night you'd go up on stage and it was magic.
Yeah. That's what I
It
was
was
going to ask you. Like in some of those situations, like with him doing it so often, whether it's a Letterman or whoever you were touring with, after a
always
while,
magic.
it's got to be rote. It's got to be like, oh, we're going through this again. But with
Yeah,
him, you said it was still.
yeah. Well, no,
it.
it wasn't. I mean, even with the Letterman and with Demis or Minnie Riperton that I performed with, it was always magic. These people who are those sort of, that's why they're artists, because they have this charisma that even, the band who's probably so tired of playing that song for so many times.
Yeah.
It happens.
Yeah.
It clicks, and it's them. It's because of them, And Manilow was the king at this. He really knew how to get the best out of all of us. It's great. It's great. Yeah.
There must be people over the years, and I always try to end episodes with folks like you with these types of questions. Favorite crazy story from the road, or just performing in general? Anything that stands out? That.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you got?
Okay. Well, there's two things, right? One is not a funny story, but it sort of is. I'm performing with and I haven't told the story a whole lot, but I can tell it now. It's okay. Yeah. I mean, a lot of people in the industry know about this story, right? It's 1980, and I'm touring with Demis Roussos. And I'm rehearsing with Demis Roussos before the first tour, which is in South America, before we came to Australia.
Okay.
And Demis had incredible orchestras on his records, huge sounding orchestras, right? And the band, we only had 11 people in the band, and we rehearsed for 6 weeks, right? And I remember my mom even came to LA during the time, and she sat there and watched the rehearsals. It was great. But I used to have to wear headphones, and I wore headphones because I'm conducting to a click track, because the orchestra is in the headphones, on tape, and I'm conducting the band. We're all playing and singing. We had 4 background singers, and Demis, great strong voice, and a great band, and that's what he wanted to do, and it was magnificent. I mean, hello. Anyway, so we go on tour, and we start in Mexico, and then we go play Chile, and then we go to wherever else, and then we go to Buenos Aires one night, and we perform at this big theater in Buenos Aires, and all of a sudden, this guy stood up in the audience and started screaming, and the whole audience was like getting really upset. I don't know what they were saying because they're speaking in Spanish,
right?
Yelling and screaming and throwing stuff on stage, and then a whole riot happened. And we had to take our instruments down or off, and they took us down in the dressing rooms underneath the stage. They had to lock the doors because there was a huge riot in the theater, stomping like elephants above us, and seriously.
Yeah.
And they claimed that we were not performing. We were lying. It was fraud. Demis was not singing. The band is not performing. It was headlines in the paper, right? Demis Roussos commits fraud. This is horrible for Demis, right? Poor guy.
Yeah.
Poor guy. It was terrible. We were all scared to death. Anyway, so a big lawsuit's about to happen. And so we had to then hire the local symphony orchestra for the next series of concerts. All these people wanted their money back. It took us 7 days. I had to help write arrangements for the orchestra. And anyway, 7 days later, in the same theater, we have the same concert. All the people come back. Big thing, like on the newspaper, Demis now is going to prove he can sing. It was bullshit because we were singing, but couldn't. Anyway, so we performed it. It was great, and the audience loved it. Standing ovation. Demis was so thankful to me and the whole band and everybody, and we got this together in 7 days. We got the full orchestra happening. At the end of the concert, the equivalent of the FBI or whatever you call it in Argentina come in, they lock all the doors. We're all under arrest.
What?
Because they didn't believe that we performed again. They didn't believe it. So they wanted this, it was this political thing, and we all got arrested and we all got put in jail overnight. This is a true story.
Cow.
This is a true story. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I have headlines in the paper from Argentina about this, right? In handcuffs with them was going to jail overnight. Anyway,
couldn't you have just played for them and said, "Hey, listen, we can do this right now"?
Well, we did, but you see, there was this governmental thing happening in Argentina at the time, and I only found out this years and years later that they were looking for a superstar like that to prove the strength of the local government, so the people could say, "Hey, these people can't get away with this." Now, the only other band in the world that was doing anything like this was ELO, which was the Electric Light Orchestra. They were performing with tapes, I mean, now everybody does it, I mean,
right.
But back then it didn't. So it was a horrible situation. And poor Demis, we got out of jail the next day, of course, but we couldn't perform. We had our passports taken away. There was a major lawsuit that happened there. We, ended up back in Los Angeles about 2 weeks later. Poor Demis had to go through this lawsuit. I was one of the key witnesses, and he ended up losing the case between himself and the promoter because of the loss, because they canceled all the rest of the concerts. And so that was a horrible situation. And I'll never forget, the impact of that made on everybody, including poor Demis at the time. Yeah,
I bet that would be a memorable one for sure. You said there were two.
Yeah. Well, the next one was with Barry Manilow, which was an amazing thing. He performed. This is '83. And it took 6 months to organize this. They had to build a stage. Blenheim Castle in England, where the Duke of Marlborough lives, where Winston Churchill was born. They ended up creating a huge outside venue stage where we had 50,000 people come to the concert. And it was the first time that anybody ever performed in one of the royal sort of environments, right? And that was Manilow's concert, which is one of his most memorable ones. And it was an amazing experience because we all flew in from London for the rehearsal on a helicopter and out on a helicopter. But when the people were out there, it was like Woodstock. It was like we couldn't see the end. And then when the lights went down and it was dusk, and Manilow walks on stage, all because they had flash cubes at the time. There's, the old Instamatic.
Sure, yeah.
50,000 people with flash cubes. And it was like the most amazing sensation that you'd ever want to feel or see in your life. Yeah. So anyway, that's it. That's boring, but those are my two.
No, that's great. Yeah, no, I like asking those types of questions, especially for someone like you who has had an amazing career. So I appreciate you sharing all this. Have you come back to Erie? You played with the Lettermen in Erie initially, like you said, that first gig. Did you ever play here again?
Not in Erie with anybody. I performed with Manilow, of course, in Cleveland and Pittsburgh and places like that, but I don't think in Erie, no.
Okay, because I know he played at the Fieldhouse twice, but once as an opener for Roberta Flack and then once on his own in the 70s, though. Yeah, so that was probably before you.
Yeah, that would have been, yeah.
When was the last time you came back?
My 40th class year reunion 10 years ago.
That's right. Okay.
Because my 50th is this year in August, which I can't come to, but I'll say hello to all my Academy friends. And we're in touch still, all of us. Yeah.
Good.
So, anyway, Chip, thank you so much. What a great chat. I appreciate it. Yeah.
This was great. Thanks, Art. I appreciate you sharing all these stories with us.
Yeah, no problem. Okay.
All right.